10:33 a.m. Strait of Hormuz, outbound lane, 14 nautical miles west of Hormuz Island. An Iranian fast attack boat just fired a rocket-propelled grenade at USS Hurricane. The RPG round detonated 3 meters off the starboard bow, close enough that the blast pressure cracked the forward deck's non-skid coating and sent a spray of shrapnel across the bow area. 2 sailors working on deck went flat immediately. Training, not wounds. Neither was hit. But the rocket had been fired at a United States Navy warship at close range in the middle of the Strait of Hormuz on a Tuesday morning with 17 commercial vessels within line of sight. And the 4 Iranian fast attack boats that had fired it were now at 200 meters and closing, engines wide open, doing 48 knots on a bearing that aimed all 4 of them directly at the Hurricane's hull. The Hurricane is a Cyclone-class patrol craft, 179 feet, 340 tons, 31 people. The 4 Iranian boats, moving at 48 knots from 200 meters, would reach the Hurricane's hull in approximately 15 seconds. The commanding officer, Lieutenant Commander James Webb, had 15 seconds. Welcome to Navy Combat USA. This is the morning Iranian forces fired on an American warship in the Strait of Hormuz in broad daylight. And the helicopter response that arrived at exactly the moment the situation was about to go somewhere that couldn't be undone. The Strait of Hormuz at 10:33 a.m. on a weekday morning is not an empty body of water. On the morning of the incident, the Maritime Traffic Management Center in Dubai was tracking 41 vessels in the Strait's 2-way traffic separation scheme. 22 outbound, 19 inbound. Tankers, container ships, bulk carriers, gas carriers. The full commercial spectrum of global maritime trade, compressed into a 33 nautical mile wide channel. Every person aboard every one of those 41 vessels could see what was happening to USS Hurricane. The commercial masters, bridge officers, and AIS monitoring stations from Bahrain to Oman were watching the incident unfold in real time on their radar displays and through their binoculars. CCTV systems aboard tankers had already captured footage that would later circulate through maritime security briefings in 12 countries. The incident was not in the dark. It was not in the early morning hours. It was not in an area where ambiguity could be sustained. It was in the middle of the strait, in daylight, in front of the world's commercial shipping. This was either an act of extraordinary recklessness by the Iranian crews involved, operating without senior authorization in a manner that would produce immediate and visible international consequences, or it was a deliberate demonstration intended precisely because it was visible. The intelligence community spent the following 6 weeks debating which interpretation was correct. That debate was not resolved conclusively. The 4 fast attack boats had been in USS Hurricane's operational environment for 47 minutes before the RPG was fired. They had first appeared at 9:46 a.m. on a bearing from Hormuz Island, the small Iranian island that sits at the throat of the strait's eastern approach. The contacts were Boghammer fast attack craft, the standard IRGCN tool for strait harassment operations. Their initial behavior had been entirely consistent with the pattern the Hurricane's crew had seen dozens of times on previous transits: parallel approach, bridge-to-bridge challenges, close pass, break-off. The officer of the deck, Lieutenant Aaron Park, had logged the contacts, transmitted the standard warnings, and tracked them as they matched the Hurricane's course through the outbound lane. Standard. At 10:14 a.m., a 5th contact appeared, faster than the Boghammers, coming from a different bearing, from the northwest, from the Iranian side of the outbound lane. The contact's radar return was larger than a Boghammer, consistent with a Peykaap-class fast attack craft. The 5th contact moved to a position directly ahead of the Hurricane, blocking geometry, 1,400 meters ahead. Park called the captain. Lieutenant Commander Webb was on the bridge in 51 seconds. He assessed the geometry: 4 Boghammars on a parallel course to port and starboard, 1 Peykaap ahead, 5 boats, outbound lane. Commercial traffic on every bearing. He reduced speed from 14 knots to 8 knots and ordered the bridge-to-bridge warnings to continue. He also activated the emergency communication circuit to Fifth Fleet and transmitted a potential hostile action report at 10:17 a.m. The report reached Fifth Fleet at 10:17 a.m. in 33 seconds. The duty watch officer at Fifth Fleet, Commander Thomas Reyes, read the contact report and immediately assessed the available air assets. Two MH-60S Seahawk helicopters from HSC-26 were conducting a patrol flight 51 nautical miles south of the strait. At 140 knots, they were 22 minutes away. Reyes diverted them at 10:18 a.m. He also notified Rear Admiral Holloway's deputy, Captain Sarah Mills, who was covering the flag watch. Mills reviewed the report and authorized Reyes to scramble two FA-18Fs from the Alert 5 posture at NAS Bahrain if the situation escalated. The authorization was standing. The aircraft were ready. Aboard the Hurricane, Webb had been watching the five-boat formation hold its positions for 16 minutes. The Peykaap ahead was maintaining 1,200 meters. The four Bushmasters were at 300 to 500 meters on both sides. At 10:29 a.m., the Peykaap's behavior changed. It turned south, away from the Hurricane, and accelerated to what the radar clocked as 52 knots, moving away. Webb's first thought was that the boats were breaking off. They were not breaking off. The Peykaap was repositioning. It moved in a wide arc to the south and came around on a bearing that placed it behind the Hurricane, joining the Bushmasters in a fully enclosed circle. The Hurricane was now surrounded on all four sides, not three, not two, all four. Complete encirclement. Webb had been watching the Peykaap's repositioning maneuver for 4 minutes when the closest Bushmaster, the one on the starboard beam at 280 meters, began closing. Not paralleling, closing. At 10:33 a.m. at a range of 220 meters, the Bushmaster's crew fired the RPG. The RPG detonation at 3 meters off the starboard bow produced a specific set of tactical conditions that Webb had approximately 15 seconds to process and respond to. The blast pressure impact on the forward deck told him two things simultaneously. First, the range from which the weapon had been fired, 220 meters when the trigger was pulled, approximately 195 meters when the round impacted, indicated the Iranian crew had fired at a range where a direct hit was entirely possible. The miss was either poor aim or a deliberate near miss. He had no way to determine which in 15 seconds. Second, the four boats were now closing at 48 knots. At 200 meters and 48 knots, they reached the Hurricane's hull in 7.8 seconds if Webb did nothing. He did not do nothing. He made 4 calls in 15 seconds. The first, all-ahead flank, maximum speed. The Hurricane's twin diesels pushed the ship from 8 knots to an accelerating climb toward 35 knots. The stern dug in, the bow came up, and the ship began eating distance away from the encirclement. The second, Bushmaster hot. The 25mm Mark 38 cannon was already manned. It had been manned since the potential hostile action report 33 minutes earlier. Webb ordered weapons free on any Iranian vessel that closed inside 100 meters. The third, flash contact report to Fifth Fleet. 2 words before the full report, weapons fired. The fourth, all hands brace for ramming impact. Because at the moment Webb gave that order, the leading Bushmaster was at 140 meters and the Hurricane was still accelerating from 8 knots. The math was not yet in his favor. The Bushmaster at 140 meters had a decision to make that its crew made in approximately 3 seconds. The Hurricane was accelerating. The 25mm Bushmaster was pointed directly at their boat. The range was closing from both directions. The Hurricane's acceleration and the Bushmaster's own momentum. At 110 meters, the Bushmaster's driver turned hard to port. Not a full break-off, a deflection turn. Enough to change the approach angle from a direct ram vector to a parallel pass. The boat passed the Hurricane's starboard beam at 88 meters, close enough that the watchstanders on the bridge could see the faces of the Iranian crew. The Bushmaster tracked it the entire way. The other 3 Bogomars broke away from the accelerating Hurricane simultaneously, the encirclement's eastern arm swinging out to avoid the wake of a vessel now doing 22 knots and building. The Peykaap to the rear held position at 400 meters as the Hurricane pulled away. At 10:35 a.m., 2 minutes after the RPG detonation, the Hurricane had opened the range to 600 meters from the nearest Iranian contact and was still accelerating. Webb did not slow down. At 5th Fleet, the weapons-fired flash from the Hurricane arrived at 10:33 a.m. and 41 seconds after the RPG was fired. Reyes read it, confirmed the context, and hit the scramble authorization for the F/A-18Fs from NAS Bahrain at 10:34 a.m. He also transmitted an updated vector to the inbound Seahawks. The Seahawks were now 14 minutes out. The FA-18Fs would take 17 minutes. The Hurricane was already building distance from the Iranian formation. But the Peykaap, faster than the Boghammers, with its 52-knot capability, was now in a pursuit position 400 meters behind a patrol ship, doing 30 knots. The speed differential was 22 knots in the Peykaap's favor. At 22 knots differential, 400 meters becomes 0 in approximately 33 seconds. Webb knew this. He also knew his ship was in the Strait's outbound lane with commercial traffic on every bearing, and a 52-knot pursuit by an Iranian fast attack craft through crowded international shipping lanes was not a scenario that ended predictably for anyone involved. He ordered the Bushmaster to engage the Peykaap with warning rounds. 2 bursts across the Peykaap's bow, ahead of it by approximately 30 meters. The first burst had no visible effect on the Peykaap's course or speed. The second burst, at a range of 320 meters, the rounds impacting closer, produced a course change. The Peykaap turned 30 degrees to the north. Not a full break-off, but no longer a direct pursuit vector. The range stopped closing. The 2 MH-60S Seahawks arrived at 10:55 a.m., 22 minutes after they were diverted. The Hurricane had been in open water for 20 minutes by then, the Iranian formation holding position approximately 2.4 nautical miles astern. The Seahawks descended to 150 feet and established an orbit between the Hurricane and the Iranian contacts. The formation's movement stopped. Then they turned north. Not fast, not urgently. A deliberate, Croy-Westiki al-Santorais, Moldowit controlled withdrawal at approximately 25 knots. The speed of a unit that had decided it was done, not a unit that was fleeing. The FA-18Fs arrived at 10:52 a.m., 3 minutes before the helicopters, routing faster from Bahrain. They were overhead when the Iranian formation was still stationary, watching the Seahawks orbit. The Iranian crews had seen the fighters arrive. They had watched for 6 minutes. Then they left. The timing, the FA-18S overhead, the Seahawks between the formations, was not lost on anyone watching. The Iranians had assessed the geometry and decided to go. The after-action review of the Hurricane incident was the most extensively documented IRGCN harassment review 5th Fleet had produced in 4 years. The incident's visibility, multiple commercial vessels as witnesses, the RPG detonation visible from several ships in the traffic separation scheme, meant the documentation was more thorough and the findings more consequential than typical encounters. The first finding addressed the RPG employment. The weapon used, identified from fragmentation analysis, and the blast pattern on the Hurricane's forward deck as a PG-7VL tandem warhead, was not the standard harassment signaling weapon that IRGCN procedures typically called for. The PG-7VL is an anti-armor round designed to penetrate vehicle armor. Fired at a ship's superstructure at 195 meters, it was capable of penetrating the aluminum cladding and initiating secondary effects inside the compartment it penetrated. The round had missed the hull by 3 meters. The review's language on this finding was precise and unambiguous. The weapon employed against USS Hurricane was capable of causing personnel casualties and structural damage had it struck the intended target area. The employment represents a significant escalation in IRGCN harassment doctrine. Significant escalation. The second finding was the encirclement timing. The review noted that the Peykaap's repositioning maneuver, the arc to the south that completed the encirclement, had been executed at 10:29 a.m. and completed at 10:32 a.m. The RPG was fired at 10:33 a.m. The encirclement was completed 60 seconds before the weapon was employed. The review assessed the sequence as deliberate. The encirclement was completed to maximize the Hurricane's tactical exposure before the weapon was fired. The RPG was not fired as the encirclement was developing. It was fired after the encirclement was complete. Planning, sequence, coordination, not spontaneous action. The third finding addressed the Bushmaster warning shots against the pursuing Peykaap. The review assessed that the warning shots had been effective in breaking the pursuit, but noted that their employment had been at the edge of the rules of engagement. The ROE authorized warning shots ahead of a vessel that had fired on an American ship, but the documentation of the specific authorization chain had not been completed before the weapons were fired. Webb had acted correctly under the tactical circumstances. The documentation had lagged behind the action. The review recommended a simplified emergency ROE authorization protocol for warning shots, specifically in pursuit scenarios. The protocol was implemented within 30 days, and the commercial vessels that had witnessed the incident submitted individual incident reports to the International Maritime Organization within 48 hours. The reports, stripped of classified details but accurately describing the RPG detonation and the subsequent pursuit, were incorporated into an IMO Maritime Security Circular distributed to all member states. The circular described the incident as an attack on a naval vessel in an internationally recognized traffic separation scheme. Iran's official response to the IMO circular described the incident as a mischaracterization of a legitimate law enforcement interaction with a foreign vessel operating in a manner inconsistent with regional maritime security protocols. Law enforcement interaction. The IMO circular and the Iranian response were distributed simultaneously to every maritime security directorate in the world. 16 maritime insurance companies raised their war risk premium for Persian Gulf transits within 7 days. The premium increase applied to commercial vessels, not to the U.S. Navy, but the signal was clear to every shipping company, every tanker operator, every charterer who moved cargo through the Strait of Hormuz. The strait was not getting safer. The IRGCN had fired an anti-armor RPG at an American warship in the outbound lane at 10:33 a.m. with 41 commercial vessels in visual or radar range. They had done it in front of everyone. And the international community's response, an IMO circular, an Iranian denial, an insurance premium adjustment, had not changed the operational posture of a single Iranian fast attack craft. The boats were back at Hormuz Island by afternoon. They would be in the strait again the following morning. Stay vigilant, stay informed. I'll see you in the next one.